Welcome back to another video where we get to geek out on the concept of theory of constraint and how it applies to event and community-driven businesses. This is one of my main ways of planning and thinking about, for example, when should an activity run? For example, if we don't have enough subscribers to it, at what point should we close that course and basically try again later? And at what point do we let it run even though we don't have enough subscribers to that activity? And theory of constraint uses throughput accounting, which is different than classical cost accounting, and that's what we're gonna dig into. All right, so let's have a quick review where theory of constraint is all about looking at the throughput of the whole system, which is the thing that generates your money. So in step one, you look at the different inventories you have, and in step two, steal socks, and step three, become rich. That is basically the main aspect of it. In dancing, for example, we can look at tickets sold or dancers developed if you're doing it not for the money. But you also take everything from the perspective of the bottleneck. The bottleneck determines the throughput. And that is the thing we made a whole video about, figuring out where is your bottleneck. Is not always so obvious. Is it within the inventory capacity? Is it with something like the cash flow or your sales and marketing, for example? Then from there, you can now start doing the throughput calculations. So this is the basic formula from the perspective of the ideas that we have here, where you look at the throughput for a certain period that you're having. So at SwingStep, for example, we have 6-week course rounds. So that could be, for example, a period we look at, but you can also take it per hour, for example, or any other period, or per month, whatever that makes sense for you. And then you look at the revenue, but you can also look at the lifetime value, and I will talk about that much more. And then you take minus the variable cost. And this is one of the fundamental places where throughput accounting differs from classical cost accounting. In cost accounting, you take all your fixed costs and you divide them by all the different activities you have, and each activity needs to sort of fairly do their pull their weight to be able to bring back the money that you need to cover your costs and profits and whatever you need. Throughput accounting doesn't count like that. It doesn't actually take considerations of anything that is considered fixed costs. So what are the variable costs? So for example, at SwingStep, we actually have very little variable costs. We have a full-time studio. Most of our teachers are full-time employees, so none of them are considered inside of the throughput accounting. Only the truly variable costs that are happening for that individual occasion is considered in the throughput accounting. So technically, very little is needed for us to decide whether a course should run or not run. And this, of course, in our case, we even have a membership model, so people are not even paying per course. So we look at the system as a whole when we look at the throughput accounting, which provides some flexibility, and it sort of makes the calculation a little bit easier. But in the video where I talked about how we plan our summer season, we made a few bets, and I made those bets based on throughput accounting and understanding where our bottleneck is. And I'm glad to say that so far the summer has been 140% better in revenue compared to the previous years because of this approach that we've taken. Now let's go a little bit more deeper into calculating the throughput per unit of constraint. And right now I'm keeping it easy and thinking of the constraint as your inventory, for example, available teachers or your capacity. And for example, if you're looking at those things, you wanna see if it's better for you to, for example, rent this that hour of studio capacity to somebody else who are willing to pay, let's say, 250 euro, or do you think you can earn more than 250 euro per hour or per day if you run a course yourself in that capacity. If you don't have confidence that you can sell that out, you're better off to rent it out. But if you do think you can earn more, you should keep it, of course. Or when it comes to your staff or yourself, your own time committed to that class, if you think those hours can be used in order to optimize and improve your bottleneck, you might want to consider canceling the class and use your time differently. But if you think you cannot, then you might want to just as well offer the class, collect some more experience in running small classes, and just take it as a learning experience, and get a little bit of the additional throughput out of your system. Now, the way we can financially calculate that is that we look at, for example, a revenue or lifetime value. Which one you choose will depend a little bit on where your bottlenecks and constraints are. For example, if cash flow is a constraint, you might want to tilt towards looking at the revenue. But if lifetime value, if cash flow is not a constraint, then you can look at lifetime value. Now, I wanna mention that this is more based on my own experience running event-driven businesses for 20 years. It's classical TOC looks at the immediate benefit of the thing, but classical TOC was first adapted for manufacturing. But again, it's a fantastic thinking tool also for events and community-driven activities. But how you decide which one you use, or you can just calculate based on both and just have more input for your decision making, because ultimately you might even decide to do it differently than what's optimal for throughput. I'll come back to that, why that might be the case. And lifetime value is basically the average of number of periods a customer stays with you. How many months do they pay you in average once they get started with you? The fundamental starting point of calculating lifetime value starts with understanding your retention rates. At SwingStep, our retention rate for 2024, in average for returning customers were 90%, for new customers were 75%. Let me quickly interrupt myself to ask you for this favor. Now, I'm committed to take the 19 years of experience I have from this and put it into these videos to share with you as much as I know about organizing events, running dance schools, building teams, running communities, so that you can do an even better job making all of that happening for you. And what could really help me is if you do all this social media magic stuff, subscribe, like, comment, share with somebody that you think could benefit from these videos. You can choose your favorite video or the whole playlist or the organizer's checklist. Anything that spreads the message and the channel will help me tremendously. All right, much appreciated. Back to the video. I would say it's a very normal difference to have between returning and new customers, especially if you have close to 100% retention on your new customers. It basically means your marketing hasn't been broad enough. You've been way too selective in deciding for your customers. But if your retention rate is anything lower than 60%, that is going to be a huge problem. And we'll see why in a moment. But if you look at the specifics, for example, in the January course round, from there we had a retention rate of 90, almost 94% for returning students and almost 90% for new students. The course round after had a little bit lower retention rates for both the returning and new students. So it fluctuates a little bit here and there. But also the thing about retention rate is that it depends where your cutoff is, but it can change because a customer might not be able to come back immediately after, but they come back a few months after. So depending on how you want to treat this, you can have that be going back in time and improve the retention rate you had. I think in our case, we do look at that situation. So everything is integrated. So the moment somebody joins, even a year later, the retention rates optimizes. So you want to look at the immediate and you want to look at all-time retention rate of a different specific course, and of course the averages of them, because you use this now for your calculations. So in order to get your lifetime value, the first step is that you're gonna get your churn rate. Churn rate is basically the inverse of retention rate. While retention rate is about how long a customer stays, churn rate just calculates how many customers per period you lose, so to say, or per cohort, so to say. And the way you do that is just you take one minus the retention rate. So if we take the example of 80% as the retention rate, so your churn rate would be 20%, which basically means your average lifetime would be 1 divided by the churn rate, which basically breaks down to 5 months of lifetime of an average customer. But for example, if we take the swing step case of 90%, 90% retention rate equals 10 months of lifetime value. That is double the amount. So understand that this is not one-to-one. A small change in retention rate has a rather big impact on lifetime value and the overall revenue that you make on it. So it's really retention rate is a very good metric for community-driven businesses to keep track of. Of course, it's also a very good indication of how well you're doing when it comes to your customers enjoying the experience you are preparing for them. But equally, if this would be 50%, if you have for a beginner series, your lifetime value is 50%, your average lifetime goes down to 2 months. There's a huge difference again in the other way. So especially if you don't have endless input of new customers and you have retention rates of 50% for your beginner experiences, I would say that's most likely the best place for you to improve on, because it's so much in your control that that I would look there. And you can even consider the loss between, let's say, 50% and 60%. The loss of money is the budget you should spend in training, learning, improving, and whatever you need to improve that situation for your business. Now, I'm digressing. Back to calculating lifetime value. So now we have all the things we need. Lifetime value, you take the average revenue per customer that I'm assuming you know, and you take the average lifetime in months. That's what we just calculated. And from there, you get the lifetime value of 300. So if your cash flow is not the bottleneck, then one of the ways you make a decision whether an activity is worth it is taking your lifetime value. We go back up here, all the way here. You take the lifetime value minus variable cost and determine whether this course is worth running or not, which is again different than if you take revenue, direct revenue minus variable cost, which is different from taking revenue and your cost accounting, meaning putting in all the fixed costs inside of that. So when you're looking at the lifetime value, you're looking at value created over a longer period of time, not just the direct revenue. And it's actually a good metric to have also, for example, for your marketing. So retention rate and lifetime value are two things you should track constantly on your business. In my experience, because it sort of comes into many different decision-making points. In the marketing, for example, if you know that you in average get 300 euro out of a customer, then but each individual course is 60 euro, then your marketing budget doesn't have to be under 60 euro. It can be somewhere closer to under 300 euro. Now, maybe you don't want to make it 250, but you can go maybe 120 euros, so double. It takes 2 months to recuperate the cost of getting that customer. You still have a good buffer. I'm digressing again. Back to throughput accounting. One of the main concept, especially when it comes to event-driven and community-driven businesses, is that theory of constraint and throughput accounting is a great thinking model. It gives you another input for your decision making. It's not necessarily the thing that makes the decision for you. If you run pure manufacturing and the constraint is in your own production, you might actually want to make the decision for you. But we sometimes make decisions that are not optimal for throughput because over time we want to make space for example, new beginners to come and not necessarily optimize for existing students, because long term that's gonna be the lifeblood of the community basically. We might make decisions about content that we really, for us, it's important that our community get, even though that's not optimal for retention rate. um, and and whether or not we even are going in the right direction. And that's also where we need to sort of understand the core assumptions we are making when we're taking a TOC approach, at least have them in the back of our mind. So first of all, it's something I've been mentioning a few times, where your constraints are not constantly fluctuating, right? There is some stability in where the main challenge is, where the problem lies. Over time, it could change, and of course, hopefully, you get so good that it does change, but not super quickly. And when it changes, the next thing becomes a stable constraint that you optimize around. And fundamentally, also, just like I was saying about making cultural or community driven decisions, it also assumes that you have lined up everything the way you want to, and you just want to maximize that and improve that process to get the most out of it. You already are aligned, but sometimes you want to pivot, sometimes you're making different decisions, and you have to just remember that you want to know what will be the best TOC decision, but then you want to deliberately deviate from it because you have other value statements that you want to make. You also want to understand that there's an assumption that the retention rate and experience for your customers don't change as you optimize or maximize your throughput. Here, there's, for example, in our case, there's an assumption that you have the skill to deal with a small group of people, medium group of people, or a large group of people, which are different skills. We really make a difference around that. And I don't know if it's because we know how to make a difference around that, or whether it is just by default like that. In terms of retention rate, we looked at small, medium, large classes. So far, we haven't been able to see any significant difference where you say, oh, if the group gets too big, people don't like it and we lose more people, or the group is too small or whatever. We haven't seen any data around that suggests that in our case. But I also know that we deliberately adjust, where when we have, for example, really full room, then we gear our experience way more to a sort of party life, community atmosphere and mindset and focus. Where when the group is medium, we might be a little bit more flexible with content, geeking into details of technique and stuff like that. When we have smaller groups, then it's much more nurturing, repetition based, the private input, so to say. So we might adjust accordingly in order to be able to make sure the customer's experience are very enjoyable, independent what size of how full the room is, basically. Finally, there's just an assumption that the constraint is within your control. It's something inside of your power to change. If you're dependent of an external event or external business for you to be able to do your business, then you're basically stuck, and you want to basically take yourself out of that situation or maximize according to that constraint. So that's going to be some of the core assumptions you are making. All right. I hope you enjoyed this session of Theory of Constraint and how we use the throughput accounting for events. We can, of course, go a lot deeper. This is sort of scratching the surface. If there's any specific thoughts you have or questions you have, please make sure you comment or message me, or let's hop on an online date and have a coffee and discuss these things together. I love geeking out about this. And again, with every conversation, every question, I get to know more where your challenges and questions are, so I can make videos around that. But also, I'm taking that knowledge and figuring out how to build a better software for the event and community driven industry. All right, I'll see you in the next one.